Welcome to episode 12 of Amateur Hours CX, a podcast on the state of cycling from our point of view in the grassroots ranks. This week, Eric didn't trick anybody to be on the show, but more on that in a second. We're brought to you by Rift. Keep listening to hear a special offer from the Helderbergs of New York. This week, we are doing something completely different. The Green Mountain Stage Race in Vermont was this past Labor Day weekend, a 4-day stage race comprising a time trial, circuit race, road race ending on the summit of Appalachian Gap, and a criterium in downtown Burlington. I had several friends who competed in this event, who I tricked into sitting down for a conversational race report. With that, let's hear from these guests.
I'm Kevin Bouchard-Hall, and I was in the Pro 1 race.
My name is Kat Culkin. I race for 3T Q+M. I'm from Michigan, and I raced in the women's P123 field.
My name is Hillel Wisner. I race for Community Bikes, or bicycle racing. They're based out of Boston, but I live in Troy, New York, in the Albany area. And I raced in the Cat 2 field this weekend.
I'm Shyla Weber, and I race in the 345 women's field.
I'm Scott Birdsey. I race for Rift Bike Racing, which is a small apparel brand that I started this year. So I kind of just raced for myself, and I did the Cat 3 field at Green Mountain Stage Race.
I am Colin Reuter, and I race for B2C2 Cycling, powered by JRA Cycles, and I race the Cat 3 race.
It was actually a very good field. It was the biggest field it's been in a long time, over 100 guys. So lots and lots of actual pros. Nate Brown, Pro Tour guy, was there. A few other well-known pros and all the other, like a lot of guys from Quebec, a lot of people from other places. It was a really good field this year. It was nice to see.
This was my first stage race and my last race as a Cat 3.
So this is my first time doing any stage race ever, let alone GMSR.
So basically, I spent all of August training for this. I did pretty much 15 hours a week for the first 3 weeks, and then tried to rest for the fourth week. And basically, I dug myself into a pretty big hole that I just got out of on like the first day of the race. So I wasn't sure if it was going to go really terribly or if I was going to be okay.
So I originally had no intention of doing this race. Part of it was that it was going into CX season. And the other part was I was out injured this year. I didn't really race much at all in the spring. I kind of came back for 3 road races, July, August, and then said I'll switch over to cross. But I was kind of riding this high of, doing pretty well late in the season. And I wanted to finish off with Syracuse road race. And they ended up canceling it. And I kind of said, okay, well, I don't want to just end. I'm not ready for this to end. And so I called my coach, Andy, and said, hey, is it stupid if I do this? And, we went over, okay, I haven't been training necessarily for some of it. I haven't done any crits, but I can go do this. It'll be fine. I knew that the hard stage, the App Gap stage, would be right in my wheelhouse. And I've been doing 4 or 5 hour rides on the weekends. So we said, let's go for it. And within 2 weeks, I rearranged a vacation I had planned, found the least crappy Airbnb we possibly could, and signed up for this race.
In a time trial, your time starts when you're supposed to start, not when you do start. So
I made it to my start on time. I know not everybody did, but
I gave everybody like a 45-second head start, and it didn't work out for me.
So I was feeling pretty rough, but you put your head down and you go. I've always loved time trials, and I thought I had good chances, and then I flatted with 1K to go. Just at the top of the little final crater dip, I hit a pothole, and as I was starting to go 40 miles per hour on the downhill, getting super low on the bike, I hear that heartbreaking of my rear tire going flat. And so I did the only thing I knew what to do, which hop off my bike, and I ran the last 1K. Funny enough, I didn't get passed by my 32nd man. So there's a lot of what ifs there, but you know what? I have no regrets, and I can confidently say I had the fastest run leg of the day.
I thought I was good at time trials because I kind of came from triathlon, but I haven't done really any of them lately. And I think it's one of those things where even a couple of years out of it, you sort of lose that like rhythm that I used to have. I don't know. It was also a weird kind of uphill, then slightly downhill, rolly, weird, no flow to the course kind of thing. So I was kind of rolling pretty good uphill, and then I just couldn't get the speed up where I needed it to be on the flat part. It was just like, what's a nice word for mind? I don't know.
It was my first TT. Luckily, you can't use a TT bike because I don't have one. I did a lot of research on the internet looking for people writing up race reports because I had no idea what to expect. Mostly with a TT because I never had done one, and I knew it was an uphill one. So basically, just really quick, this is pretty nerdy, but I had a lot of fun on ridewithgps.com, basically trying to replicate the elevation of the TT locally and just practice having that elevation.
The time trial, the weather was great. I felt really good. I got to do it last year, so I felt like I knew the course, and I caught my 1.5-minute woman at the line and was like, wow, I just rocked that. Like, I just did really well. I didn't. I got 14th out of 22. And when you feel really good about an effort, but everyone around you is just stronger, it's like, okay, it's going to be a hard weekend. This will be fun.
Yeah, I would have done pretty well. It actually would have been my only result that I would have had. I would have been top 10. It was all really close. Like, so like in like between like 5th to or 6th to 10th was all like, 4 or 5 seconds. And I was in that ballpark based on Strava. So I basically started too fast, and I looked like the first minute I looked down, I was like, yeah, that's not sustainable. And then I calmed myself down. And then when I got to the top, and then like, when you really need to suffer, I was kind of like, well, I've already lost it. So like, why go that hard? Because, it's a stage race. So, like it would have been, pacing would have been different, I'm sure, but maybe the time would have been the same. It would have been worse. I don't know. But either way, I didn't get my actual time for a silly mistake.
I am a very bad time trialist, which I think is a nice way of saying like, I just don't pedal very hard. So I went out and I did my best to pedal hard. So this year we had a strong tailwind, which was very motivational. So I was over 1.5 minutes faster than I've ever been, which made me feel awesome. But everyone else was fast too, of course. So as soon as the results went up, I was back to knowing that I sucked. So I finished 63rd out of 72 dudes. And most embarrassingly, that's my best finish ever in the GMSR TT. So clearly I am improving. The first year I beat 4 people. The second year I beat 5 people. And this year I beat 9 people. So if I do it a few hundred times, eventually I will place top half in the Cat 3 TT.
I've never done a stage race before, so I didn't know, do you go all out on the time trial? Do you try to kind of save it because Sunday is going to be the really hard day? So I kind of tried to stick to a wattage that I knew I could handle and not feel horrible afterwards. And I think if I could do it over, I would definitely try to go a lot harder than I did because, I don't know what it is, but I felt completely fine the next couple days. So I think it doesn't really make sense to conserve anything.
We got a 74-mile circuit race to treat us like, the Cat 3 World Tour riders that we are. We had a legitimate 3-hour road race.
Yeah, so we did the 74 miles or so. So my GC ambitions were out the window pretty early on. So I was racing for teammates. I had a teammate in 4th overall going into day 2. So I did what any good teammate would do, and I attacked from basically neutral. So mile 4 in a 74-mile road race, I went and I was out there for a bit solo for about 30 minutes, and then I got caught by the field and did the next best thing I knew to do, which was attack again. And this time I went clear with 3 other guys, including 1 teammate, and we suffered out there for about 55 miles until the pack brought us back. Apparently, they started working together, which is amazing for a Cat 2 field. So they brought us back, and I promptly went flying out the back, having spent all my matches in that 55-mile break. But at the end of the day, surprise to pretty much everyone, I had taken all the intermediate points and gotten myself into the green jersey. So despite not having sprinted a single time that road race, I was in the sprint leaders jersey by the end of the day.
So I tailgun way too much in races, and I'm really boring, and I'm bad at sprinting. So I kind of was like, I'm probably going to get last. I just want to finish with the pack. So I just played around a lot. So I had a friend in the yellow jersey, and I brought back a breakaway for her. She didn't really need me to, but I wanted to. And then I felt really guilty because it was my friends in the breakaway also. So then I let out one of my friends for the KOM both laps. And then I got last in the sprint. But I had such a fun time getting to do things for once instead of just sitting on and saving my legs for a sprint that I wouldn't do well in. So yeah, no regrets. I had a wonderful time.
Yeah, so the race is mostly flat and one little KOM in there, but it was basically do-nothing hill. And a break went right from the get-go. And everyone – so the thing what happens here is that when you have a Pro Tour rider, everyone assumes you're the strongest guy. They assume correctly, and they don't want to do any work. So this break goes, and everyone stares at Nate Brown. And it gets further and further away. And at one point I had it like 4 minutes with a lap to go. And then Nate decided that he would start to work, and he went to the front, and a few people helped him, but mostly just Nate. And he just drove the field around at over 28 miles an hour average for 70 miles and brought the break back basically within 10 seconds with like a K to go. It was incredible. Oh, and then he went and rode Lincoln Gap the next day, or like Rochester, or like not next day. I mean, after he towed us the entire field around at 28 miles an hour by himself, he then went and did extra training. The depth of his fitness is unbelievable. So it's really nice. It's cool to see. You just can't imagine how fit he is.
It seemed like the common theme on stage 2 was people talking about how bad they had to pee. I don't know what we all did wrong. It was like maybe what it is that we're used to being in like categories that don't start at that time of day, or like it's only 3 hours, right? Like I know I'm an old man, but I'm not that old. Like 3 hours without urinating is not that demanding, and yet like I had to pee, my teammate had to pee. We had guys pushing other guys while they peed. Like all we wanted to talk about on lap 2 was peeing, and I don't know why.
I am coming off a separated shoulder in April, on which I cannot crash again. And so the circuit race of everything was, even more so than the crit, to be honest, was just avoiding crash after crash. There were a lot of, I kind of ride towards the yellow line, so I have an escape route. And there were a lot of times where I was just getting shoved over onto the yellow line. And then it was pretty fast paced, pretty much from the intermediate sprint on. And our lap times are faster than the pro women by a good amount. It was just full gas there was the intermediate sprint and then the QOM point, and it was just full on after that. And I was, again, like there wasn't much for me as far as GC going on there other than make sure you finish in the bunch, until we got to the sprint. And I said, okay, you get some bonus time for GC if you're in the top 5 in the sprint. And I was in a spot where, I could kind of go for that. And then unfortunately, the woman in front of me decided to pull out and then go very, very slow. And I had to kind of slam on my brakes so as not to run into her, which botched things a little bit, but, came across with the field in a decent position and didn't crash. So that was a success for that day, I guess. So I think I would definitely be more aggressive. Again, I was saving so much for that last day. And when it came down to it, I don't know if it was worth it. And I think I would have been a little more aggressive because really being in the front, I would have had less chance of crashing than where I actually was, which was kind of me thinking I was playing it safe. So
somehow some guys started attacking like right away, which I think is mainly just a function of being excited. When we don't know what we're doing. So like 2 or 3 miles into the race, there's already guys going up the road, and it's a testament to how dumb Cat 3s are that I thought long and hard about if I should go to the front and try to bring it back, as if a break up the road with 70 miles to go in a Cat 3 race matters, and as if I could do anything about it, having just gotten 63rd in the TT.
So circuit race, my plans were basically to feel out if a green jersey might be in the cards. I do like sprinting, so that was kind of on my radar, something I might want to pursue. So I contested the first hot spot, or it may have been the second. I was still feeling sort of unsure of my legs from that kind of hole I trained myself into. So I was kind of cautious, but at the same time wanting to try and do some sprints. So I did contest one, and there were definitely some good sprinters in my field. The guy who ultimately got the green jersey was a pretty legit beefcake of a guy with huge legs, and he even had like a lead out teammate for this hot spot, and I fought him for it, but he was able to get past me. So at that point I was kind of feeling like, well, I don't want to just like be fighting this guy for sprints the whole time, because it's probably gonna kind of wreck me, especially if I'm not sure that I'm 100%. So I kind of like decided, well, I'm just gonna try and maybe do stage wins and try and do this GC thing.
Then we went over the KOM and found out that it wasn't that challenging unless people wanted to race it hard. So as someone that, as mentioned, does not pedal very hard, I was pretty psyched by this. But we assumed that on the second lap, the climbers would want to race it hard, because why would the climbers want to go to the finish with a bunch of fat sprinters if they don't have to? So I basically spent the next lap preparing for like some serious Thunderdome time on the KOM. Hit the KOM a second time. I was ready to rip it, and we never ripped it. It was a very pleasant surprise. We got within 500 meters of the KOM point, and then we just sprinted. And I was at the front as part of my plan to survive this climb. So I survived it very easily, went down the backside, and it became time for the Thunderdome in the sprint.
So the finish played out pretty well. I had a nice forward position coming into, it's kind of a downhill sprint, really fast finish. So I kind of was in third wheel maybe, and maybe 500 meters in, nobody was really going for it. So I just kind of decided to do a long sprint. That seems to be something I'm kind of usually have luck with. So it was good. I was kind of doing the thing where I'm looking down at the ground, sprinting, and kind of like looking out of the corner of my eye if I can see wheels coming. I know I always do that, and I wasn't seeing any wheels coming. But then on the other side of the road, I saw that same sprinter guy starting to get past me, and he did end up nipping me by like maybe a half a wheel at the line. So I got second on the day, which was certainly, awesome for me. I was happy about it. And that put me, that had a time bonus, which was nice, a GC time bonus. So I got an 11-second time bonus, which bumped me from 6th up to 3rd GC, which was pretty sweet.
And this is when I found out that sprinting in a criterium is very different than sprinting in a road race. In a crit, you've got all these corners that keep like narrowing the pack down. If you want to move up in a crit, you basically just pedal really hard, and you can like find some wind to eat, to go around, or you can like dive bomb some corners. But there's ways to move in a crit at the end. In a road race, not so much. We had the yellow line rule in play until 500 meters to go. The road is maybe 5 riders wide. There's 70 guys in the race. So it's really hard to manage your position at the end of the race. So, like a big dum-dum, I followed a sweet surge of bodies up the gutter at 1K to go, because that's what I would do in a crit. It was clearly time to like ride the surge and then sprint. Problem is that when the surge petered out, there was guys in front of me and guys on my left and the ditch on the right. And all of a sudden it's 700 meters in the line and there's just nowhere to go. So we were still packed into super tight space. Dudes on the yellow line at 500 meters could move left, and then they had like the whole world to sprint in. So that must have been nice for them. Meanwhile, I was still in the gutter, bumping my bars off dudes, trying to figure out if I was going to die. I didn't die because I'm here. And then maybe around like 150 meters to go, I finally got through a spot and started sprinting and managed to get 10th, which is way better than my TT, but also obviously totally not interesting to anyone except me because it is still not on the podium or in the points or in the time bonuses. The thing that hurts the most is the night before the circuit race, when I was talking to the team about how the finish was going to go down. I said like twice, be on the yellow line at 500 meters. And then 8 hours later, where am I? I'm on the right side of the white line at 500 meters because I don't listen to my own advice.
Amateur Hour CX is brought to you by Rift. Find oddities and gear for you and your bike, designed in the Helderbergs of New York, serving the seasonal road riders, the scrub zone, and the general public. Get 10% off your order at rift.bike using coupon code AHCX10. That's RIFT.BIKE with coupon code AHCX and the number 10. And for those of you in the Northeast, we bring you this special announcement as our cyclocross content for the week.
Yeah, October 21st, which is Sunday. It's earlier than it's been in the past. We have Wadham's Cross. I am going to be mowing the course soon. It should be really fun. We'll have food for everybody. It's a fairly friendly atmosphere. It's literally on my property. It's far away from everybody in the world, but it's a nice day. So yeah, Wadham's Cross. If you're looking for a race to do on October 21st, come on up. It's really easy parking, really easy to get here. We're just off the interstate, and it's a fun course.
And now, back to the show.
So stage 3, as you might imagine, not exactly the arena that I was expecting to excel in as someone who was a bottom 20% T-tier, and it was certainly not because I'm light.
This was my stage. I was super excited for this. I'm climbing is my thing. We had driven it, the day before, and everything else on the course was fairly straightforward. And you hit app gap, and it's actually not that bad until you hit about 1.5K to go, and then it just kicks up and it's a wall.
I've mainly been racing crits this whole season. I've done a lot of crits, and I did a lot of training for those crits. Basically, tons of sprints and that type of high intensity sort of neuromuscular stuff. So I was pretty cautious and not so confident about doing mountain stuff, big climbs. Not something I've really been doing. The good news is that my legs are definitely starting to feel pretty good. I was feeling like I was kind of like back on my feet. And at the very beginning of the race, a group of about 5 guys established a break. I did not think much of it because there was a hot spot 10 miles into the race, so I figured they were going for that. The green jersey was with them, same guy. So I said, I'm not going to mess with any of that. I want to save myself for these climbs and see if I can, stay with the guy in the yellow jersey. Who looked pretty lean and mean. So let those guys go. We go past the hotspot sprint, not seeing them. We get to the first big climb, which is the Middlebury Gap, and we catch the green jersey there, but none of the other guys.
This was the first year where I felt like we raced pretty hard before Middlebury. We had my teammate flatted like 1 mile into the race. And as he flatted, the attack started going. So it was like his day ended instantly, basically. You're not going to chase, even with like a good wheel change, which he did not get. You're not going to chase back onto a Cat 3 field that's chasing the break up over Granville Gulch. So that sucked for him. But somehow we had a break of like, it was like 5, and then like a couple guys got across. So this break kept growing, and then it like got out of sight. So there's like 8 or 9 dudes up the road. And coming into Middlebury Gap, the moto comes back and tells us that the break has 3 minutes, which I still don't completely even believe. Like, I need to go look at the Strava flyby to figure out how the hell these dudes took 3 minutes out of us. But in any case, like, break is freaking gone for them. I'm like, I've worked harder than I've ever worked before on the way to Middlebury. It's only been an hour. I'm trying to eat food, and I know that like Middlebury is going to be for me. Like, Middlebury is D-Day. I don't even pretend that like on App Gap I could have a good outcome, but the goal is always get over Middlebury in contact with the field. And I'm 0-2, and now I can proudly say I'm 0-3. This year on Middlebury, I did even worse. I missed last year's power by 20 watts. Like 3 minutes in, I was just like, what is wrong with my body? Why is this happening? I spend so much time riding up a hill looking at my stupid Garmin, looking like I know what my watts should be. And the Garmin was like, well, you don't have those watts today, so good luck. It was really grim, and I still don't really know why. So I crested the hill, in like 60th out of 70, right? Like hopelessly off the back, but it doesn't matter. Like, I obviously started chasing like an idiot as hard as I could down the hill. I passed a dude who's clearly never ridden it before, because he was heeding the warnings in the tech guide about how like the corners were dangerous, and they are, but they aren't. It's like, it's one of those things where like, I think one time a guy crashed, and now the tech guide just tells you that you're going to die if you don't brake for this corner.
So at that point, it's becoming clear that they've basically made a go for it. But I felt really good going up Middlebury, had no problem staying with the yellow jersey and the other leaders. Push it down the descent. And at that point, we started to get time gaps from the car. The break was, about 2 minutes, a minute and a half in front of us. It would kind of go between those two. And there's maybe a group of 30 guys in this group. And at that point, I felt pretty sure that we would catch them because there was still a lot of race left. And I made the decision that I would let the yellow jersey do all of the work, and I would just stay back and conserve. And indeed, he did do a lot of work. Him and a few others seemed like they wanted to kind of be the heroes and chase down this break, which was totally fine by me.
So we chased like all the way down Middlebury Gap. Eventually I like give up because chasing is actually really hard. And as mentioned, I don't pedal hard. And like all the guys that I passed come back to me, and we form up into a group of like 8 or 9 guys. And I mean, obviously like Peloton is long gone. So then we start the ride over to App Gap. We're being very civilized. We got a sweet double pace line going on. It's straight like Cat 3 World Tour riding. The only problem is my body is like effed, and we have a long way to go. So I'm like skipping pulls in the gruppetto after 10 minutes, and I start eating everything in my pockets. It just like doesn't matter. It's clear to me that whatever happened on Middlebury was not a temporary problem, but it's going to be like a day-long problem. So as soon as the gruppetto gets to Notch Road, I just get like shelled straight out the back. I have to paperboy up Notch Road, which is a 500-meter climb at like 9%. This has never happened before. So gruppetto's gone. I pass a guy with a flat tubular, so his life's worse than mine because, I'm like, oh, dude, I have a tube. I'm going to be your hero. And he's like, I have a tubular. So we talked about how fucked he was for a bit, and then I rode on. So that should give you like perspective on what kind of quote racing I was doing at that point.
We got to Baby Gap, which was sort of the second to last big climb, sort of. It's sort of a prelude to the App Gap. And we still hadn't caught them. So I was sort of thinking, well, what can I do here to make the best of it? and the field was kind of not pushing it so hard. Right between Baby Gap and App Gap, there's a downhill, and I decided I would sort of push a little bit and see what the field would respond with. Again, there's about 30 guys. So I sort of started to roll off the front gently, and nobody came with me on this downhill. It was maybe flattish going into a downhill. So I decided I was feeling really good at that point. I'd conserved well, so I decided to push it, and I started, getting into a really aero position on the top bar, doing like the Chris Froome pedal thing, and saw a guy who had fallen off the break group ahead in the distance. So I pushed myself over to him and asked him if he wanted to trade poles, and he did. So we put a lot of time on the field, which was awesome. And that was super exciting for me because I figured maybe I'd have a chance of catching some of the guys on the App Gap climb.
When I got to the top of Baby Gap, I found one of the GC favorites from our race running his bike with a broken chain. That was hilarious and terrible for him. So that made two people now that were having worse days than me. Very uplifting. And I gave him a push all the way down to the bottom of App Gap on his chainless bicycle. He seemed to think that it was a major sacrifice on my part, which is cool because it wasn't that hard. And then I rode up App Gap at roughly 180 watts, which is as slow as you can go without falling over. But I whooped his ass because he was on foot. So I finished ahead of him. I finished ahead of Tubular Guy. And there was one jabroni that got in that early break and worked himself over even harder than I worked myself over. So he cracked from the early break and was more dead than me. So I finished ahead of one guy with a functioning bicycle and two people without functioning bicycles for a final place of, I don't know, we'll call it 67 out of 70.
And we had a couple mechanicals too. So a couple of the women, early on, one of them dropped their chain, another had a flat tire. And it was good because they both happened so early in the race that they were able to chase back on and get back with the field. But then one of the other women, while we were descending in that chase, dropped her chain, and I felt horrible because she had, she was in the sprint jersey. She was actually in the leader's jersey that day. Had won the circuit the day before, was kind of flying high, and then dropped her chain on a descent. And so I was lucky that none of that happened to me, but seeing that happen kind of puts you on edge too.
We get to the beginning of App Gap, and my partner says, go for it, man. I'm pretty gassed because he'd been in the break. And so from there, I just pushed it, and I was not able to catch the remaining 5 guys, but I came really close. I was like 5 seconds away from catching one of them. So I got 6th place, and I felt really happy for myself that I put down a pretty solid effort and put a lot of time ahead of the yellow jersey. He lost a lot of time. So yeah, it was good.
Yeah, so I had a fairly I wouldn't say I had an emotional breakdown because I've sucked enough times in my life in bike racing. I kind of know what the deal is at this point, but it was very disconcerting to go out and perform that badly. Since it was one of those things where I'm like, am I going to wake up tomorrow with the flu? And I was kind of hoping that I would, just so there'd be an explanation. But alas, when I woke up Monday, no flu. I did eat a lot. And I drank a lot. So I was hoping to be reborn like a phoenix.
And App Gap was just an amazing adventure to go up that thing. And the finish was awesome. And Tim Johnson was he was on the mic. So it was just really cool.
Yeah, well, App Gap for me was fairly easy because I was totally imploded. So that is for the Pro 1 race. It's 103 miles. We do 3 gaps. Historically, you go down 100 and it's rolly and fast, and a break usually goes right around some of the rollers and then before the sprint into Granville. So you have this time to try to build up a gap. In the other fields, you're trying to build up a gap before Middlebury Gap. And these races, you have to try to build up a gap before Rochester Climb, which is a little bit further away. And anyways, based on the year of the day before, I knew that everyone was going to stare at Nate Brown to do all the work. And I knew he was here for training as well. So he probably was happy to let a break go. And then he was going to probably implode everybody on the climbs and ride steady in between. And those climbs were probably going to be the worst things in the history of the world. And the break was, if it worked together well, had a chance to gain time because they were going to work together better than he was going to be able to do by himself on the flats. So I was like, it would be a pretty good idea to be in a break. Unfortunately, I don't take any risks because I'm an older man with children who has to work. So I had a hard time moving around in the pack because it was bigger and more competitive than it's been in the past. So I was kind of basically a tail gunner. So I had to figure out how I was going to get in a break, but not actually ever be at the front of the field. And thankfully, basically what happened is breaks started to go and got really fast. When I get the lined out and fast, I have a chance to move up because I can just use extra power to move up the outside and not actually have to fight anyone for wheels on these rollers. So I got to the front when Nate tried to bridge across. A bunch of people covered him. Then he went again. And after 2 accelerators from Nate, basically the field was like blown to pieces. And I then was able to counter. And with one other dude, I bridged up to the breakaway. And then that was the end. So then the field, and there was the break. The break was probably like 12 guys. And I was pretty happy about that because that was a hard bridge. It was like 8-minute 2-man bridge at like 33, 34 miles an hour. So that was hard and fast. And I was very happy about that. So we got up there and I had a teammate in the break, which made me feel like an idiot because I bridged up to it not knowing I had a teammate there. But thankfully we had 2 teammates there. But if I had ended the break by, stringing it across, I would have felt like a real idiot. But anyways, that worked out. So I had a teammate in there. It was like 11 guys. Everybody in there was a hitter. Everyone was really good. So like we had the guy who just won Mount Washington. We had Landry. I have a guy called Nutso Daniel Miller who just goes and breaks all the time and is insanely strong and really nice. And like Silver Pro guy, a bunch of Canadian pros, some other people, Ian Clark. So like all just like heavy hitters, and we all worked together right from the get-go. Like didn't miss pulls. Everyone pulled through. It was amazing. We got to Rochester. We went hard but steady. Lost a little bit of the weight. Got over the top. Went bombing down the descent. Went right back to working even. Basically, it was like the best break ever that worked perfectly together. Rode steady. I don't think you could do this course faster than our breakaway ever. So Nate was doing this by himself, and we were the most perfect breakaway ever. And we had like 2 minutes going into Middlebury Gap. But Middlebury Gap had a headwind, and we worked together really well. And we ended up having 4.5 minutes over the top of Middlebury Gap. And at this point, I think we were 8 guys left in the breakaway. And so we then continued to ride together to Baby Gap. And at which point my wheels came off big time. And Ian Clark, Connor, and I, my teammate, all came off the break. And the 5 guys went up the road.
I knew the morning started off great because I walk into the Porta-John and there's a Jimmy Dean's breakfast bowl in there. And I'm like, okay, this is foreshadowing for the record. So we roll off and weather's great, pace is slow, but I really have to pee. And 14 miles in, there's a whole Peloton pee break, which I was so excited about. I felt so pro. And with women, it's super hard. So we all hop off our bikes, pull down our bibs, and we're just on the side of the road peeing. I was like, I will pay the $50 to feel this cool if I get fined for this. Unfortunately, I'm in a skin suit and I drop half my food and I pee on it. So this is mile 14 of the whole stage. And it's like, well, I guess I'm going to just do it with less food than I wanted. And yep, that pretty much set the stage for me. I managed to dangle on for most of the climbs or chase on right after. And I hit the bottom of F Gap with the group, which was my stretch goal for the day. And totally blew up on it and enjoyed all the chalk markings and finished several minutes behind the leaders, but I was just happy I made it.
So my legs were pretty toast after day 2 of 55 miles on the break. My teammate was still nice and fourth, but I had a nice lead over the green jersey and one intermediate sprint point to contest. But as I said, I don't know how to sprint. So I did the only thing I knew to get some points, and I again attacked straight off of neutral. So mile 3 this time in a 106-mile road race, I just went for it. And I lasted 20 minutes this time before a chase group and then the pack brought me back. And I counterattacked my own attack and went immediately after I got caught. And this time I got daylight with one other guy who happened to be my competition in the sprint competition. And kudos to him. He sat on my wheel. We split the intermediate points. And then instead of sitting up, we just kept going. So these two sprint guys decided to try to go for the long break on the App Gap stage. And we eventually got somebody who bridged up to us, and the three of us lasted 65 miles out front of the pack. I think we peaked at a 3-minute gap. And then eventually the real fireworks started behind us, and we got brought back on Middlebury. And I promptly just exploded 120 miles of breakaway in 2 days, and my legs just said no. And I got saved by some crit racers who were just trying to make it to day 4, who kindly pulled me all the way to App Gap. But yeah, no regrets. I left it all out there, and I kept the green jersey for one more day.
We had a break of 3 women go at the first QOM point, which is over Middlebury Gap. And I was kind of debating, do I go with that? Do I not? And I played it right. We ended up catching them really easily on the descent. I didn't go for that. And dropped my bottle in the bottle handoff. So that feed zone is really like not super well designed. And where Jacob was standing was towards the front of it. So you're still kind of coming in hot on a downhill, and it doesn't pick uphill. But at the slight uphill, there's so many people that I don't know if I would have been able to get it there either. So I ended up not having an extra bottle, which was okay. It wasn't super hot, but it was a little bit of a, is this going to cause any issues?
I almost killed a lady. So that happened in the feed zone. I was at the back of the pack because I was trying to do as little as possible. My average heart rate for the race was under 120, and for 28 miles an hour, which is pretty neat. But we come into the feed zone, and I am getting my second feed. And as I'm grabbing my bottle, I look to my left, and I see a woman in running clothes running up the middle of the field to my left, trying to hand a bottle off who she had missed the person further down the feed zone. She hands the bottles off, and now she is like right in front of me, and I see her start to shoot over to the right because, that's where all the people are standing, where she should have been standing, because she finished her feed, and she ran right into me, and but just in front of me, and I was going, 20 miles an hour, and I went right into the back of her at 20 miles an hour, and I laid her out. But I didn't crash, so I got my foot out, used my cross skills. I guess I was told that I gave her an enormous chainring gash in her back, so I kind of did a body bunny hop barrier thing. And once I got once I figured out that I wasn't crashing and settled, I looked back and I looked at her, and she was on the ground, and she looked up to me like she wanted to murder me, and I felt absolutely terrible because I don't actually want to hurt anyone ever. And my team guy, Luke, was like, "Don't apologize. What are you doing? Go pedal." So that was my only effort of the day, was then catching back on after I tried to murder someone in the feed zone.
So anyway, we get to the bottom of App Gap, and I took off with a couple other girls who had been in that break and just didn't look back. And I was safely in second place with about a kilometer to go. And then we hit that wall section, and I had thought about changing my gearing. So I am on a 5236 with an 1128 in the rear, and I just couldn't turn the pedals over. And I ended up getting passed right before the line by a couple of people. And I moved up to 5th. So I had been in 8th after the time trial and circuit, but I had really hoped to move up more into 3rd or something like that. So I don't know. I think if I had to do it again, I might put a compact on for that, because I don't know. I mean, it could have just been I gassed myself on the early part of the climb, but I just couldn't turn the pedals over.
Basically, I was in an amazing breakaway. I had a wonderful bridge. And as soon as we went up Rochester, I felt like garbage. I looked at my power numbers. They were not very good for me. And I just got tired. By the time we were an hour and a half in, I was like basically bonking. And we, at that point, I think we were probably 40 miles. We probably had 60 miles left. 60 miles left. I was bonking, which is hilarious. I did better last year with a Camelback and a cyclocross bike than I did this year on a road bike with like real road stuff with a road team and much more fit. Just shows you, bike racing's weird. That's why you do it. It's because you never know what's going to happen. You hope you're on the other side of it. Where, it all works out for you. And but unfortunately for most people it doesn't. But there's a chance that it would. So, yeah. I'm trying to be positive about it, philosophical about it, I suppose. But it's still a bummer to have trained so well and then it just didn't show up on the day, and you don't know why. At the same time, I also have like a wonderful family and a nice job and a stable life, and I do it for fun. I love my teammates and all the things that like actually provide happiness and stability I have. The only thing I'm chasing as a result that's meaningless and no one cares about. So like if you step back, it's a pretty good situation.
So I already hate crits in general, but I did the so I have one buy on my road bike, and I managed to leave my clutch off on my rear derailleur. So I dropped my chain in a particularly bumpy corner and was chasing, and then I got pulled. But right after I dropped my chain, it started raining, and then there were like, I think 3 crashes that I know of in my field. I think almost everyone in my field hit the ground at some point except for me.
We went down to the crit on Monday feeling, I had like no confidence obviously after that ride. But I just kept eating stuff, and we got there, and then I remembered that crits are wicked fun, unlike this other bullshit that I've been doing for 3 days. So I rode 1 lap of the crit course, and I completely forgot that I felt like trash because my brain was hyped to race crits. So, I used all my top secret GMSR criterium tricks, which I will not say on this podcast. You have to pay me for them, to get my crit performance super dialed.
Yeah, so day 4 was a crit. I was very excited about it. It's a famous crit course. It's super loved by many. I was sitting 4th GC after the road race, and I did some math to see if I could win enough GC time bonuses if I could get myself to 3rd place, and it wasn't going to be quite doable. I think I was about 40 seconds down, and if I was able to get 1st place and the 2 time bonus preems, that would get me about 30 seconds. So that was out of the question.
Coming into the crit, I was super nervous. So I have raced probably 2 true crits in my life, which were my first year of cycling 2 years ago. I didn't race at all last year because I was injured, and none this year because I didn't plan to do this race until 2 weeks before, when a couple other races got canceled. So I had no practice with criterium whatsoever, and no training for kind of those quick power bursts or any of the cornering or anything. So I was kind of going into it a little bit nervous, to say the least. And I also know, crits are sort of notorious for having crashes, and not wanting to crash on my shoulder. I was a little wary of that. So my initial strategy was they call the top 10 in the GC up to the line. So I just figured, stay out in the front, don't be near anybody crazy, and you'll be fine. The women in that field were on the gas full throttle from the whistle. So I stayed up front as long as I could. And then there was maybe halfway through, there was an intermediate sprint, and I kind of got pushed to the back because I wasn't really trying to do anything there. And I mean, it was sort of just hold on for dear life, and I'm not going to gain any GC time, just don't lose any. And, I definitely learned a lot, and I learned where I could maybe conserve a little bit of energy, or if I had a weak moment where I could make that time up. The corners were really tough because there's a lot of spots where, the line that might be a good line isn't a good line because there's a sewer grate or manhole cover or whatever it might be, kind of in the way. But the environment for that race was super cool because, you're in downtown Burlington coming through Church Street. There's people out eating lunch. I had on almost every turn of the course, there was somebody I knew that was also there racing, yelling my name out. So it was, that was cool. It was very spectator friendly and you felt supported the whole way. You were never alone. But it definitely taught me a lot about staying in a good position and kind of not being on the defensive, which is where I ended up, was just trying to react to what was going on around me. But it was pretty cool because there were some women from other teams who, you could work with, and if they had their weak moment, you could jump up, fill in the gap and pull them along, or vice versa. So I think we started that with like 38 women. So there were 45, I think, pre-registered. And by that day, we had lost a few from the stages prior. And I was last of the main group to finish. Everybody else had gotten pulled because we just kept dropping people off the back of the field. And that was 23rd place. So it kind of tells you how fast that was, that many women. And some of them, were up there in the GC. They're not, weak riders whatsoever, but just couldn't keep up with that pace. And it was much, much faster than I expected it to be.
Yeah, I'm not a crit racer. I've done one crit this year and it had one corner. And so doing one of the most technical crits in the Northeast after 120 miles of breakaway riding was going to be a tough ask. And like I said, I had 6 points going into this competition and knew it was going to be tough. Mike, who was right behind me, had a 6-point deficit to make up, but he's a crit racer through and through. And you know what? I got my call up. I tried to hang in there and I gave it my all, but I slowly lost wheels one after the other. And after about 15 minutes, I was tail gunning the crit. And after about 20 minutes, I was off the back and they eventually pulled me. But kudos to Mike. He fought, and despite having ridden the breakaway yesterday with me, he managed to grab just enough intermediate sprint points to beat me by 2 points in the green jersey competition. So I got to see that from the sidelines after being pulled, and saw some really impressive racing from Gino Villafano, who managed to lap the field solo. So that was really cool to see from the sidelines. My teammates ended up managing to stay relatively where they were in GC placings and get enough points to move up to the ones for next year. So that was pretty cool to see and cheer on as well. And yeah, no regrets. I didn't really have any ambitions going into those 4 days of racing, and never having done it before, I didn't know what to expect. And I'm just glad I made it out in one piece and happy the legs managed to carry me towards impressive and valiant 120 miles of breakaway riding over the weekend. So,
like, literally the whole place was just clapping for him, cheering for him. So this guy was down about 90 seconds in the GC, and he took off in a break by himself very, very early on. I don't know what lap it was. And so along the way, he picked up GC time at each of the intermediate sprints for GC time, as well as the gap he was making on the field. And on his finishing lap, he caught up to the back of the main field of men. And he ended up, I think, winning the GC by a matter of less than 10 seconds or something. And it was, that solo effort in the crit that did it for him. And it's something that probably going into that crit, whoever's in the leader jersey thinks he's got a comfortable lead. And, he just has to keep it together. And then something like that happens. That's totally unexpected. And it was really cool to watch that. And it was nice because at that point, so many other people had already raced. So we were all able to sit around and enjoy watching that. And it was a really good show that he put on, as well as being awesome in the effort. But it was also very entertaining.
They didn't tell us it was a neutral start. So when the race started, the car rolls away at 10 miles an hour. And a dude just attacks straight past the car, which was sick. And that's what they deserve that for not telling us that it was neutral. Although, I'm pretty sure rule number 1 is never pass your lead car. And but I love it. He didn't even hesitate. He gets the clip in He's just like, I don't know why this car's here, and just rides by it.
It was a hot day, and for me, pretty much things started going sketchy immediately. Somehow my front water bottle disappeared in the first few laps. I didn't see it, I didn't hear it, or I didn't feel it leave the bottle cage, but I know that it was there when I started the race. I looked down and it was gone. Didn't hear anyone yelling bottle or anything like that. So that's still a mystery. And my second bottle, I grabbed the wrong one from my cooler. It was like some old, bottle with like really some old drink mix that had become like basically like spoiled. It tasted like just like this sour disgust. So, and it was only like a third full. I didn't want to have like 2 full water bottles, you know, because like it's a crit and it's not long. But I probably should have because it was really hot out. And likewise with like an ice sock, I probably should have had the pantyhose and the ice ready to go because it was hot. So hydration wise, that kind of was all wrong from the beginning. But I was really motivated, so I felt like maybe I could just power through that and just, you know, get over it and man up.
Yeah, so we're blasting around on the front of the crit, mainly surviving. And I realized that, kind of like the day before, I don't feel amazing, feeling kind of empty. And at 6 to go, they ring the bell and they say $100 preem. And if there's anything I recognize, it's a good excuse to build up my excuse portfolio while getting some money. So I attacked into turn 6 on that lap, took the preem sprint by a mile because, you know, nobody else was like that excited to go all in with 5 laps to go. So got myself $100. Oh wait, just kidding. It's $100 split over 3 places. So it was only $50. But let's be honest, I'm a Cat 3. $50 is still the friggin' lottery. So that was cool. But then obviously I had to recover, and the finish of the race was 5 laps away, which is like 7 minutes of racing. So I got busy recovering. And as everyone knows, recovering means never, ever, ever seeing the wind. And the further back you go in the field, the less of the wind you can see. So I sagged myself back to like 15th or 20th, which is dangerously close to getting caught in the undertow. But things were pretty cool. There was at 2 laps to go, super dumb classic Cat 3 crash right in front of me, where like I think a guy didn't realize that when you race bikes in tight spaces with 2 laps to go, like there's going to be some movement. So he just like lapped wheels with someone and toppled like a sack of potatoes. This probably slowed down other people. Somehow didn't slow me down. That was cool. We come into 1 to go. I'm still like defending my kind of trash position in 14th, as if like I can get from 14th to 1st in a lap. And as you might imagine, that didn't work out. You know, at like the moment of truth when I needed to be going places, dudes in front of me were like bumping elbows and almost crashing. So I decided to not pedal, which is good. I stayed alive. They stayed alive. But like not pedaling when everyone else is pedaling is a bad way to maintain position. So that put me back even further. So then I kind of spent the whole last lap sprinting, trying to get back to the sprint so that I could be in the sprint. And I would say that I kind of rejoined the sprint as it was happening, which is not like not the optimal way to do it, you know? So like 3 turns to go, I was in 15th. 2 turns to go, I was in like 10th. 1 turn to go, I was in like 7th. At the line, I was in like 5th. So it was a really good half lap to cancel out my really terrible lap before that.
Then it was down to the finish. So I wanted to win, of course. Even if I couldn't, you know, get my GC podium, I still wanted to try and win the stage because winning is fun. So I maintained good forward position for the last 10 laps or so. And the last 2 laps or so, you know, a few attacks started coming. It's funny, there's not a lot of attacks in that course because it's so technical and there's so many turns that come pretty quick one after another. So there's not as many attacks as you would typically see in like a 4-corner crit. So once I was able to kind of grab a nice position up front, it wasn't too difficult to maintain. And on the last few laps, probably the last 2 laps, some attacks did come, and I kind of surfed the wheels and found myself leading it out on the last lap. And normally that might not be such a good thing, but again, with all the corners and kind of me feeling pretty good, I felt confident and happy to lead that front group out and try and see if I could win it. So I just basically pushed it as hard as I could. That was just going to be my plan, is just try and keep the pace so high that everyone would be too tired to really attack me.
So that's crit racing. You mentioned though that Scott Birdsey is going to be on this pod, and shout out to him.
The final 2 corners of the course are both these downhill sweepers, really high speed. And my plan was to take those basically as hot as I could, and try and, get whatever gap I possibly could before this uphill sprint to the finish. And I really thought I could win that uphill sprint, even being first, because if I had that momentum going down those corners, and I feel pretty good doing uphill sprints. Those are usually what I do best at, so I felt good. But that first corner, that first downhill corner, I just took too hot, and 1 second I was feeling ready to win the race, and then the next second I was just sliding down the road very fast on the pavement.
Shout out to him for the solo crash with 2 turns to go. I look forward to him crying when he tries to tell you about that, because one of the ways I picked up a spot was by not hitting him while he was lying on the ground, and no one else was on the ground, which means I think it was his fault and his alone.
So it didn't go ideal. Basically, my time bonuses and the preems canceled out the time I lost. So I stayed 4th GC and did not win the crit. But I had a good time, that's for sure. And my injuries weren't bad at all.
Oh, I guess at like 2 laps to go, apparently some dudes like bumped but didn't crash, but then one of the guys like decided to abort mission, or maybe he got pushed into the fence. But anyway, I guess he went like over the top of the fence and kind of like toppled into a cafe, right onto someone's baguette, which is super Euro. And I think it's great. I think that's awesome. He was fine.
Oh yeah, and I didn't do the crit. I stayed home. I played Legos and watched Harry Potter. We watched. I got through 3 Harry Potter videos. I built a lot of Legos with Sam. Got a lot of snuggling with Tobin.
Overall, this is my favorite race. I got to do a whole bunch of PRT races this year, and Green Mountain Stage Race is better. So, 10 out of 10. Everybody should do it. Come back next year.
So, I mean, just finishing it was super cool, and my goal going into it was to land on the podium, and I, fell just short of that. But it was definitely an experience. And I know a lot of people don't do it because of the cost and the time and the planning that goes into it. And I think it's really worth it. I mean, you're racing with the same people day after day after day. And it's really cool to get to know them and you kind of see their strengths and weaknesses, help each other out. And it's, I think, especially for women, we don't always have a lot of women in our fields. And being in a field of, 45 women going into day one was pretty inspiring.
I think it's just in general with the stage races, it's the preparation becomes even more really crucial day to day, and not losing focus of that preparation. I think by that last day, the focus wasn't all there for really being prepared. Like an ice sock, really, that's something I should have had.
I'm finally like getting my stride at GMSR, where I like actually know what it's all about. So this was like, I was like less shell shocked by the whole experience, where I was like, I'm going to sign up for a sweet 4-day stage race. And at the end I was like, yep, that was a sweet 4-day stage race. The first couple times I did it, like blew my mind. It's really important to end with a crit because I suck at the rest of it. If we did the crit first and like app gap last, I would finish it. I'd be like, that's the worst thing I've ever done. I'm not doing this again. But instead, like, I always finished on this high note of like racing the funnest crit course in New England and like doing okay. So I loved it just like every year. I'm still like emotionally devastated from how poorly I did in the road race, but I think like give it 11 months and that I'll get over that and sign up again for sure.
Overall, given the first day was pretty heartbreaking with the flat tire, second day, magically riding myself into green, and third day trying to do it again. This is my first year up in the Northeast, and it's cool knowing that people are finally starting to know who I am, even if it's not because I got any big results, but just because I managed to be at the pointy end of the race for part of it. That's really cool, and that's really satisfying, and it's giving me something to look forward to do next year during the next season.
Loved it. Amazing. A really solid event. It's obvious why it's kind of a historic, classic bucket list type road race event. They really nailed the details of the racer experience across the board, down to the smallest details. They really had it covered, I felt like. They were always looking out for us. They communicated really effectively, really thoroughly. And yeah, I really recommend anyone that's interested in road racing or even mountain bike racing. I know there's stage races. I think it's really worth the expense. Kind of the thing I would always hear is, well, it's a lot of money to do stage races. So for me, it was such an adventure. I think it was worth the money. It's almost like a sleepaway camp in a way. It has that same vibe where you kind of make friends with the people that you're racing with every day. Certainly not the whole field, but maybe you kind of have a few buddies you make, and it was really awesome. Yeah, A+ event.
Thanks for joining us for this special episode of Amateur Hour CX. I want to give a special thanks to all of my guests who gave their time to be on this episode. You can find me on Twitter at mwalling, and all of my guests are listed in the show notes. Don't forget to subscribe in your podcast player of choice so you get the next episode soon, which we've already recorded. Thanks. See you then.
Yeah, so in the middle of stage 3, before like my body fell apart, Scott Birdsey rolls up next to me and starts talking about the podcast. And then like in typical road race fashion, we just have to talk about like stuff for a while because it's not that hard. So we mainly talked about how much Eric likes to talk. And I was like, yes, he does. And then at some point the race probably got fast again and we stopped talking.